We roll on this morning. We are glad to be with you and glad to welcome in our next two guests. Sandy Middleton is Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention. Reagan Owens is a trauma therapist, also with the CVP. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Sandy and Reagan are going to talk to us a little bit about that. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I really appreciate your time. This is one of those topics where we don't love necessarily to talk about it. We don't love to get it out in the open, but unfortunately, domestic violence is far more common than maybe any of us would like to admit. And I'm convinced as I get older and we just have life experiences that it doesn't necessarily discriminate. It happens in places that you might expect it to happen, and it happens in places that you would never expect it to happen.
That's a very important point, and we talk about that a lot. You know, there's an assumption that it's only a certain demographic, and that's just not true. I mean, we see abuse in the finest homes and the finest neighborhoods, and you know, at the other end of the spectrum as well. As a matter of fact, we're in contact with about 1,500 victims a year, either through our crisis line or in the courts or there in our emergency shelter. And so it's definitely a big problem in the metro area.
Sandy, is domestic violence only physical, or can verbal abuse and financial abuse in some cases, can those qualify as well?
Absolutely. And you know, I've had victims sit with me and say that, you know, they had rather their abuser beat them than degrade them, and, you know, say things and withhold, you know, we've seen abusers withhold prescription medicine, money for groceries, not allow moms to take their kids to the doctor, and because I think you have to remember that domestic violence isn't about it's about power and control, and you know it gets mixed up sometime. And I know in the courts we go back and forth with prosecutors and judges because they want to send these offenders to anger management, and it's like, no, because this is not about anger, it's about power and control. And these abusers believe that they have the absolute right to make every decision and have absolute power over their intimate partner. And when you look at it, I mean, typically they don't jump out at the red light and beat somebody up in the car next to them. They save that until they get home, and that's where they perpetrate their abuse in the home. And
last thing kind of along that, I mean, the ability to communicate. We have never been more reliant on our phones to communicate with others. And I've heard of cases where that's has kind of become a form of manipulation, like taking a partner's phone and trying to kind of limit their communication to the outside world. It's sick. It is, and again, it just goes back to power and control. Who have you talked to? Who'd you get that text from? Who did you sit with at lunch? All of these stalking type behaviors, and you know, you brought up the phones and everything. Now the cyber stalking is such a component, and there's so much technology that we've seen trackers put on vehicles and cameras put in homes. And it really is sick. It's scary, and it's particularly hard to prove stalking as a part of domestic violence because, you know, it's such a gaslighting experience that a lot of times it's hard to make somebody else understand and believe that another individual is acting like that, and the emotional trauma and you know that it causes to the victim is huge. Reagan, I mentioned just a second ago that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's why we're talking about this. You work with domestic violence victims. What is the process like as you begin to try to deal with people to create healing?
Well, I start with their background, and then it's all about what they want and what they need. You know, a big thing that we like to encourage at the center is empowerment for these women because they don't have control over their lives and their abusive relationships. And so I at least want to be able to give them that in their own healing and kind of give them what they need and me not tell them what I think they need.
What's the difference for you in dealing with someone who has been a victim of physical domestic violence versus, we'll call it emotional domestic violence?
I'll be honest, I haven't really experienced anyone who's had physical violence without the emotional also.
Oh, really?
That may be a thing, but I think it's pretty rare. And like Sandy said before, if not all of my clients, 99.9% of them say that they would much rather be physically beaten than the emotional abusive side of things.
What about the flip side? Do you see those who are victims of the emotional strain of domestic violence without dealing with the physical part of it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And those victims, they have a hard time feeling like they're victims. They have a hard time understanding and believing that they've been victimized because it's not physical, and the bruises and the scars are not, you can't see them. And so because they have a difficult time proving it to the outside world what they've been through, then they kind of have a hard time believing it themselves.
Obviously,
and a lot of times the physical, the bruising and the marks and whatnot, that sometimes is the avenue for a person to get help, because if somebody sees a bruise or a mark or something, it's somebody in their family or their friend or somebody they work with may be like, hey, I'm worried about you, let's try to find some help. And so I think the physical side of it, it actually can open up a door to hope and healing, whereas the emotional is like Reagan said, it's just hard to prove, it's hard to get your hands around.
Obviously, the Center for Violence Prevention is there as an outlet for help for victims of domestic violence, but there's so many people that don't make it to you guys, or they don't make it to other therapists. So in terms of just kind of day-to-day life, if you have a friend, if you have a colleague, if you have someone who you have some interaction with, what are some tips that the two of you would provide in terms of being a friend, in terms of how to talk to a victim about their experience without being judgmental, without, Reagan, as you just said a second ago, projecting your beliefs onto them and letting it be their story? How do you go about doing that?
You want us to? So I think for me, it's always knowing where to point people for help, and because sometimes when people get emotionally involved with a friend who's hurt or is a victim, a lot of times they can put themselves in danger, and so we always have to think about that. And then also friends are more likely to say, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. And like Reagan said, true healing has to be based in their own empowerment, in a victim's own decisions about what's best for her, what's best for her children. And so, having the information that you can share with a victim, where to call, who to call, what kind of help they can find there. And then I think first to actually believe them, believe what you see. And because if they tell you something, that may be their one cry for help. And if you don't take it seriously and you don't provide some kind of support and understanding, it may be a long time before they have the courage to reach out to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, I think the believing them is so, so important, because a lot of people don't say anything because they are afraid nobody's going to believe them. And also not really, in the same way of not putting your beliefs on them, not telling them how they should feel about the situation, because however they feel, this is not a normal situation that these women are in. And so whatever comes up for them feelings wise is normal. They're responding normally to an abnormal circumstance. And so just kind of accepting how they feel as true.
If you want more information about the Center for Violence Prevention, you can go to their website, msc4vp.org. That's the number 4, MSC, the number 4vp.org. They are there for you and can help direct you, even if you're not in the Jackson metro area, the Pearl area where they are headquartered. they can help direct you to a place in your community. Ladies, thank you so
24/7.
much for your time. Thanks for helping share this message, and please keep up this incredibly important work.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back with you right after this.